initially I found a series, there were 3 photos of not even the seals themselves, but of rollout impressions from cylinder seals from Kerman and Baluchistan. And these have been called the Marashi seals because we don't have anything written from this part of the world. The Sumerians called this region Marashi. This is the rollout of one of the seals where we have a snake goddess. And I think this might be the Rosen seal. I forgot to put the name in here. But she's seated within a shrine. She's up on a platform there. She has snakes rearing up out of her shoulders, rampant, with their mouths open. She's very potent, her hands to the breasts. In front of her is an eagle, which continually appears with her in one form or another. And then a procession of women going toward her, holding snakes at their waists. And below that, you have a woman drummer. We have a woman playing on a lyre. This is one of the main musical instruments that comes out in the archaeology, and a group of seated devotees. So that's one. Here's another one. Sorry, I didn't put the names for these, but they're like New York seal, Rosen seal, Faruqi seal. So one of those. Here again, the goddess with the rampant serpents coming out of her shoulders. This time she has a headdress with horns. She's enthroned. A woman is kneeling in front of her. Here's the lyre that I was speaking about before. A floating snake, a flying eagle, another female figure with a serpent in hand. And then the whole scene is set off with serpents. Third seal, snake goddess, this time in her shrine, but it has little rays. It's like the aura of glory around her sanctuary. And this time the serpent is in her hand, like the other figure I just showed you, instead of serpents coming out of her body. And then we have dancers and people in ecstatic postures of invocation, naked woman dancer here, 2 women facing across an altar, above which arises another goddess with the head of an ibex and horns, who also has snakes in either hand. And in fact, we see the same kind of altar, but this has got those pointed horns, the horned altar that you see a lot in Southwestern Asia. Also, again, a woman seated before it, actually a couple women seated before this altar. And then up here in the corner, the goddess is there. She has an animal head, looks like maybe even a double eagle head. And she's surrounded by a double-headed serpent. So this is her shrine, or her noumena, her sacred aura. And then also other beings, various animals and various chimeric beings, including both male and female headed birds, lions, and also still the floating snakes are going on. Well, here's a better close-up of the goddess and her animal head. So this is somewhere on the plateau of Iran. I don't have a site name. This is so typical. I'm very lucky. I just found these other images while working on this show. I just thought, okay, let's go look, see if there's some more of those Marashi seals, because I knew there had to be. They're so developed and very, very specific in their style. And guess what? There are. It's just that they're sequestrated, and only specialists know about the existence of these seals and their very rich goddess iconography. So here she's seated entirely within this circular noumena of rays. She's still enthroned. That may be a snake in front of her. Then there are other goddesses. So here's a horned goddess with what appear to be serpents emerging out of her body. On the other side, a goddess with grain coming up out of her body. And so then it repeats, because this is a cylinder seal. Now here's a close-up of her. It looks like she has horns as well. So Black Stone Temple of Sacrifices. And this is from famous Greek archaeologists that did excavations in this region. Here's another one, and holding the snake again, seated inside the noumena here, worshipped by male figures. One's got a bow slung over his arm. The other one has snakes emerging from his body, and a horn crown very similar to the one we saw her wearing in other scenes. And this one has maybe a wolf crown. So these may be deities again. Another horned figure, which could be a woman, could be a man, holding a branch on kind of what looks like a serpent throne, but then you see it's part of the tail of this lion. So again, perhaps goddess seated on lion motif. But what I want to point out here, and this is jumping ahead to the Zoroastrian cosmology, is that Anahita is associated, and various other female divinities are associated with the Kharna, the divine glory that is attributed later to Ahura Mazda. But it's said to be present at the peak of a mountain, the highest mountain, and you have these trees of life growing up out of it, which are called the Hauma tree, and there's other names for trees that contain the seeds of all life in them. So there are elements already present here in the mid-2000s BCE, maybe 2400, something like that, that are going to be reflected later on in Zoroastrian cosmology. This one, so here's the seal and here's the rollout. Lucky to get a color picture for once. We have a seated goddess with greenery coming out of her. And they usually label her as the grain goddess. You'll notice that she's flanked by ibexes. They're all around, in fact. And another, probably goddess because of the horns, standing in front of her. Could be a female rotary. Crescent moon there floating in the sky. Green things growing everywhere. So this is from Shahdad. This is also southeastern Iran. We're still in the same place. And what they tend to do is they kind of make this rectangular chunk out of the kneeling lower body of the figure. She's got these, it looks less like grain in this particular cylinder seal. Actually, these remind me a lot of the signs that the May coming out of the body, the shoulders of Inanna. There may be some relationship there. But she's seated on a serpent, coursing along, and surrounded by the ibexes. So this goddess ibex association is very strong, and we have to really look back to the Neolithic symbols of the ibexes to see that there's a continuity here that may not openly display in the Neolithic art as goddesses, but here we're seeing that connection being made, and it continues, as we're going to see throughout this show, to be made in archaeology, even of later periods in other regions of Iran. Here's the grain goddess, or the vegetation goddess, seated again, this time on top of two ibexes. You could argue for these little floating symbols to be vulvas. There's our scorpion deity, serpents. Here is a male figure with ibex horns flanked by chimeric winged man-headed bird creatures. He's got serpents on either side of him. And this is in gold. Obviously, I only have the rather poorly drawn reproduction of it. And then here's a seal in chlorite, so they're still working with this kind of stone. And the rollout, once again, we have a goddess who is seated on a throne. She's associated with snakes, but she's winged and horned. So we may be dealing with more than one divinity. I mean, we clearly have this grain goddess who seems to be separated out, but the horned goddess recurs in different forms, sometimes winged, sometimes with snakes in that position. These are kind of snaky looking wings, actually, on her. Devotees seated around her. These are clearly ceremonial scenes of reverence towards the goddess. We've got a standing woman here with this interesting headdress coming out from her. And so we're looking at women's ceremony. This is really important because this is quite late in time to see such a strong female presence in priestessship, basically, that is not nearly as strong in Mesopotamia or in the Indus Valley at this time period. The winged goddess comes in many forms, and here again, that rectangular lower body starts to be very abstracted, flanked by women devotees, and you've got these running animals along the bottom, some of them with wings. From Jalalabad, this one. Tepe Yahya, still in that southeastern region, and here's that lower body has become this sort of pattern shaped, probably supposed to represent the folds of her clothing as she is seated cross-legged or kneeling. She's horned and winged. We've seen a lot of those already. Here she's winged but no horns. and always women. She's always in the presence of women. This one's a little hard to make out, but you have the winged goddess again, serpent in hand, or this actually may be held by, if that is a standing figure. It's not at all clear what that is. We've got kneeling animals in the scene. And here's more winged and horned goddesses also seated. And sometimes she stands in what seems to be the middle of a tree. And this is a motif we know from Syria in this same time period, especially the Hurrian culture. And it spreads its influence out eastwards all the way to the Indus Valley. And that's a separate show, the North Indian material. A goddess standing in a tree which is sort of split open, and she's holding the branches apart in the middle of them. So we're seeing that in Iran as well. Now, I don't have photos. This is the part of gradual recovery. Someday maybe I'll get pictures of these, but we just have the drawings. So here, horned, and she seems to have the grain coming out of her shoulders. Another goddess who has grain or greenery coming out of her entire body. And women with snakes. So this is very much like the first slide that I showed you from these seals, and it's combined with the greenery goddess seated below with this kind of folded up lower body. Here they are again, horned goddess and greenery goddess and winged goddess with snakes. And so this goddess of ibexes is all over the place, and this particular motif is influenced by Mesopotamia. This looks very much like Ishtar in some ways. The wings, very prominent here, but holding the animals upside down. So you will see this in Iraqi art, the mistress of animals, or even the master of animals motif, but also in the Hittite world very strongly, from where it makes its way over to the Greeks. And so you will see Artemis holding animals in this way, but it originates in southwestern Asia,